Here we go. So we're delighted to have you join us for what is the unexpected version of the third of our three-part webinar series this year, engaging all learners in the middle years. And Shelly and I are just so excited to engage with you this year. And we were always planning to do this together. It's just in a different format. You'll notice our hashtag is engaging MY, middle years learners, and Shelly and my Twitter addresses, our handles are on the bottom corner as well. And thank you, SD61, for having this vision to create this opportunity to connect us around the province and beyond. Please note that we are recording this session, but we'll only be recording the speakers, Shelly and myself, and our slides, not you or your breakout sessions. So please be comfortable with that and know that it's just Shelly and I that are on the hot seat right now. And if you didn't have a chance, if you've just joined us, we invite you to, in the chat box, say hello with your pronouns behind your name. And if you'd like to locate yourself on Indigenous territory, that's a decolonizing practice in one way that we can engage in that work together. When we move into our small group discussions, please turn your cameras if you can. It just helps you feel connected to each other. And just know that we're making sense together. And in the background, Denise and Dave are keeping track of the chat box to see what's happening. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land that I join you from is the unceded territory of the Silks Okanagan peoples. And we'd also like to acknowledge that the host district for the series is ST61, and the traditional acknowledgement of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations territories is the Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations and those traditional territories we live, we learn, and where we do our work. You'll notice on the right, though it's a little bit fuzzy, is a map of what we now call British Columbia, but identifying the nations. And that's another decolonizing practice, just a way to acknowledge our First Peoples. Why do we do territorial acknowledgements? We really want to move from just acknowledging the territory to engaging our students and our colleagues in our communities and having conversations about, so these are questions that you can follow up with your kids. Why do we have acknowledgements? How's it related to what we're doing here? What's the history of our territory? Or what are the impacts of colonialism here? What's the relationship? What's your relationship to this territory, and how did you come to be here? And if you really want to go into a critical literacy place, how might we disrupt colonialism in this place? We know that you will take that up in your context in a way that's suitable for them. Also notice that you'll have access to the slides, which will go on this ST61 website after this webcast, and you can click to find out more about your territory by clicking on that link. We have just two more acknowledgements that I'd like to begin with, knowing that we are not in the times that we have normally been in. And so I start with this from Nancy White. The invitation calling me is, how can we stay connected to each other in any way in a time of social distancing? The pragmatic manifestation of that will be to think with fellow practitioners, share practices, insights, ideas, and inspirations on how groups can productively meet, engage, connect, and then experiment and iterate to make progress online in a way that builds on our strengths and helps us to move past fear into abundant action. And so we welcome you today to join us in abundant action. We're pretty uncertain in terms of how things are going, but together we will move forward and we will support each other. You'll notice the quote on the right just talks from a health perspective that we need to think a little bit less as individuals and to decolonize by connecting as community. And so we invite you to participate today, to support each other, and to be a middle community across contexts, lands, nations, and school districts. Here's our purpose for today. Aren't you excited, everyone? We're going to check back in on what this focus has been this year. And so we'll revisit the key tenets of middle years philosophy and pedagogy. I've also embedded some liberating structures into today's experience so that we can all be experiencing some of these practices that decolonize Zoom and make sure that we're not actually reverting to practices we don't believe in. And it's a chance to connect and share and think about what we're doing in the next month and into the fall. And I would just like to thank my Liberating Structures community across North America. These are, when you go into the slide, you can link on to the Liberating Structures button, and it'll take you to a website with these strategies and more that are openly available for you to use and adapt. We're going to have two key liberating strategies. The first one will be MAD-T that we'll use in this first section, and then we're going to move into Conversation Cafe in small groups. I feel like I'm at a party where the doorbell keeps ringing. It's quite fun. So in this first chunk, we're just going to revisit the touchstones, the key ideas that we've been exploring. And we're going to use MAD-T Party, yes, as our strategy as we go. If you have feelings about Johnny Depp, just keep them to yourselves right now. There we go. MAD-T etiquette, whenever I'm online and I'm engaging with a group of kids, of adults, as I always share the protocol that we're working from that creates an equitable experience for folks. And so I invite you to stay curious and dig deep and have fun. How middle years is that? To honor your first thoughts. And we're going to be using the chat. I'll prompt you how. And the way we're going to use it is going to result in this cascade of responses, which makes it more purposeful, engaging, and novel for kids and adults. Here we go. And I'll explain that piece at the end. Here we go. So our big ideas are touchstones. The first one of our shared touchstones is that we as middle years educators value young adolescents, are prepared to teach them. We don't teach them like 17-year-olds, and we don't teach them like 10-year-olds. We recognize that our middle years kids need us to be advocates for them, to sometimes translate what's happening because they're not quite sure what's happening. That they are developmentally unique. They are growing at this age in ways that they'll never grow again. And there is more chemical excitement, natural chemical excitement in a middle years learner than any other time. And so we just have to remember that they will engage more quickly, have more emotions, and say things without realizing they're saying them. And it's our job to advocate and support them to be okay and to really resist correcting, adjusting, or judging them, because they're just in that process of development. Our role as middle years folk is a lot around mentorship, and I'm sure you've been noticing that in the last 2 months, right? To connect and nurture and reinforce that they are who they are and we see them is always important as a middle years educator. And lastly, that the pedagogy we use needs to be effective and engaging, because the attention span of a middle years learner is less than it was just 12 months before. And so we have to find ways that bring them in, because if they're not in, then they're out. I got one more for you. These are kids that I've taught over the years. So students are engaged in active, purposeful learning. That connects to that last bullet. We know that middle years kids have the ability to hypothesize, and so we need to give them opportunities to come up with questions. Sometimes I have them come up with their own question of the day, or to come up with how do I think these things together, but we have to be so careful not to be delivering content to them, but engaging them and doing something with the content where they generate their own questions or find ways that things go together, which is the next piece. At this age, kids need opportunities to organize ideas together. You can call it note making, I can call it clustering, but students need to actually say, here's how pieces go together. That's not only how our brains work, but they need to build that muscle right now. The last two are, our middle years kids they can grasp long-term cause and effect relationships. And so we need to be giving them something where they can link big chunks of content together and say, this goes with that, or that happened because of that. But just working with pieces of information doesn't result in deep learning for middle years kids. They need chances to say, how does this go together? I think this is how it goes together. Or here's another way I think it might go. And last one, peeps in the house. Peeps in the house hashtag. Our middle years kids need to play a role in their own education. You might call that self-regulated learning, everyone. They need a chance to set a goal for themselves, to reflect on how things went, to say, here's something I did well, here's something I need to work on. And in no time more than right now, when they're engaged in at-home or blended learning, where they get a chance to kind of say, not, I did the same thing as somebody else, but what did I do? How did it go? And what could I learn from that? Are you ready for the first MAD-T? Okay, In your chat box, you're going to write a phrase about something that stood out to you, something that's like, yeah, yes, or that works with me, but do not press return yet. I'm going to tell you when to press return, and then we're going to get a waterfall. So I'll show you the two slides again. We, as educators, need to be thinking about these aspects of our kids and how we work with our kids. There's Gerald. And we, as middle years educators, have to recognize these kinds of aspects of their learning are what we need to embed in. So here's your job in the chat box. Type something in that's important to you or that's a connection you made, but do not press return yet. Oops, I pressed return. Look away. Type something in, something that was important to you, a connection you made, something you've been focusing on. We won't judge your typing. And we're all going to press return in 3, 2, 1, go. Look at it, people, watch it happen. Yes, so just watch the flow happen. Hi, Sandy Mustard. Hey, Patricia Payne. Hey, Kim Haleko. Thanks, Cherry. Okay, friends, you got a feel for this? We're gonna do it 2 more times. This one's called Mad Tea. Oh, that was a ding. Okay, next. Middle years kids need a challenging, integrative, exploratory curriculum. So when we're designing something, whether it's online or in a blended situation or face-to-face, we're really working in middle years, not to say we're in this subject right now, but rather to create something that's integrated or connects across things. We want chances for them to explore over time. That's why often our lessons, have you noticed, don't finish in the allotted time. They need chances to have experiences over time to try something out. They need some kind of challenge. If you don't get a chance to fail as an adolescent, you actually don't develop your capacities and grow your dendrites in the place that you can. So less about marks and getting things right and more about trying and failing and learning. And I think I've already mentioned this. Wherever we can, we need to incorporate student-generated questions and concerns because that's what's building their capacity and their critical thinking. And that is the heart of engagement at this age. Got one more slide for you. Our middle years kids, they are not only diverse, but extra diverse. One day you're able to engage this way, and the next day what's going on in your body is helping you engage in another way. So we can't say this kid learns this way because you're learning differently all the time. And so that means we have to be embedding not just we think you're this, but we have to allow our kids to have choices and engage in different ways because their bodies, their brains, and their hormones need different things at different times. In the middle years, that's from day to day. We know that actually using digital tools is really helpful for middle years learners because then we're helping them use them in critical ways, right? And thoughtful ways, not letting them figure it out by themselves. And then lastly, we need to be welcoming not just kids' strengths and interests, but their cultural and personal background funds of knowledge. The more kids can connect and share something about who they are in their learning, the more it makes sense to them and they integrate the learning in a holistic way. Otherwise, for middle years kids, it doesn't stay long because there's too much to fight with to let it get in. Here you go. You ready for the chat box? Yes. Something that connected, that fit with you, that you're like, that was just yesterday. To go into the chat box, there we are. Challenging, integrative, exploratory curriculum and using multiple ways of teaching and learning for our kids. Type something in that box. And we're ready to press send in 3, 2, 1, go. Look at the number go. We got stuck at 78. Great. Got one more round, friends. Okay. So we already knew this, but it's come back home, hasn't it, in the last 2 months? At the heart of middle years teaching and learning is varied and ongoing assessment that helps kids move forward. The idea that you need feedback, not when something gets marked, but just along the way. Kids need to here's something you did well, and here's something you can work on, and then they need a chance to say, and here's my next step. All the conferencing you've been doing with kids over the last 2 months, this is the payoff. Kids getting some feedback on something and doing something with it. But most importantly, we need to put kids in the driver's seat where they're reflecting, they're setting a goal, and they're making a plan. And Shelly's going to talk about this in the next chunk. This age, this time is about developing identity. In session 2, I talked a lot, if you go back to the webcast archives, I talked a lot about the research around developing identity, but at its core, it's that kids are becoming self-aware in ways that are very sensitive for them. And so we're helping them to develop their identity even as they're exploring. We need to support them to believe in themselves. They need positive feedback at this age, but descriptive feedback. Here's something you're doing well. But our goal is not to label them. Hey, you're an astronaut. Our job is to say, I see you did this. That's really cool. What could you do with that? Kids need opportunities to explore. That's why we have exploratories in middle years, something to explore, try out, figure out, like a passion project, wink, nudge. And also kids need some help to shape their lives, to say, this is what I believe, this is what I would like. Because when we do that work, we develop agency in them, which means they believe they can make a difference in their own lives and the world. And right now, it's not how many assignments are they submitting, it's that they know that you know that they're going somewhere and that you're reinforcing that. And they need a chance to say, I did do something this week. And you need a chance to say, yes, you did. Go a little further. Okay, are you ready? Last time in the chat box, you can do it. My voice just broke. It's because I'm talking about middle years education. Formative assessment, what rings true for you? Identity development, what rings true for you? In the chat box. In 5, 4. Is the countdown stressful? 3, 2. I love what you're going to say already. 1. Return. It's a cascade of our ideas. Shelly's going to pick up on these two, the fact that we as educators collaborate together, and secondly, that we need to value the diversity of our kids and the gifts that they bring. We're going to beam you off into small groups, everyone. Feel the excitement. And it's, oh, I have this really nice example. Okay, here's the speed example, friends. This comes from Kimberley, BC, School District 6. And this team worked on taking up these ideas in the first year of their high school because they recognize that their grade 8s are middle years learners. And so what they did throughout the year is they focused on, throughout the whole year, bringing art into everything that they did. With an Indigenous mentor, Lori Jo, working with them, and also with older kid mentors. And so what kids got a chance to do is for each unit, represent something they learned about using art. So that they were stretching themselves and showing their creativity and representing ideas that they were learning about in modalities that weren't just paper and pen, but gave them a chance to shine in terms of other strengths and modalities. Grade 8, everybody. So they're in their 3rd year at Selkirk Secondary with their grade 8 year doing integrated, co-planned, co-taught learning. And at the beginning, it was kind of surface. But what they feel like in year 3, first of all, they've built in their timetable, time for staff to co-plan. So because they're a team, they've also found the kids now describe how they learn and demand opportunities to share their strengths. So the 8s who are now grade 10s are saying, you know, I could show that another way. And so kids are having that agency we talked about. And teachers, not just in grade 8 and other grades, are saying, what are ways that we can connect the learning? And as Carson, one of the teachers at the school, says, the membrane is now more permeable. It's less silos and more finding ways to connect together. I just want to highlight a little bit around that they found during COVID, the most important practice that they've kept from the regular school year is the check-in. They call it the Hundy check-in because there's 100 kids, but just that chance to check in and share where you're at has allowed kids to feel some connection and some ownership in terms of their learning. So even though we're online and face-to-face, they found that those social emotional learning practices have translated critically and importantly into the other environments. So the Hundy check-in continues. And even as they move back to blended learning, their plan is to have the kids who are face-to-face and the kids who are online participating in the check-in 1 day a week, all together to connect them, even as they go to move to their learning. Okay, and I just got a couple examples of their Hundy prompts. How was your weekend? Tell us about your most, it's about kids bringing themselves forward, not content first, kid first. And I think I already described this. About a third of their kids will be on site next week. But the point is that they're connecting everyone together. And they saw that this focus on nurturing the individual within the group has helped extinguish cliques and bring the group together. And kids are risk-taking by connecting with others. So there's a sense of we're one community versus getting stuck in an identity that may not be your identity. You may remember that from your own middle years experience, colleagues. Here we go. We're going into Conversation Cafe. Yes. I see less excitement than I was expecting from your faces, but it's going to be, thanks, Nadine. So here's where we're sending you. This is our second liberating structure. And in Conversation Cafe, you just get beamed into a room and each of you is going to share some highlight, something that's important to you, something in your practice, something connected to what we've been talking about. It's really a chance not to say, what haven't you been doing, but to say, yeah, there's something in here that I have been noticing or that is important or that I have been reinforcing. It's our chance to connect across the province and beyond and say, we are in it together with these kids who are barely the same kids that we saw at the first week of March. Are you ready? Everybody gets 1 minute. You have to time yourself, everyone. And if you're gonna do it with those kids, same thing. It builds that self-regulation. Nobody's in control. You're just taking your turn and you're gonna say, what's something that's true for me? What's something that resonated for me? Or what's something that I've been doing for these last 2 weeks that links to what we've been talking about? Can you do it? We'll find out because it's gonna be like Star Trek. Have fun in your rooms and we will bring you back in 5 minutes. So just time for one round of everybody saying something. There's 5 people per room. See you soon.